All right, we're going to get started here in just a second. Welcome, everybody. Just resolving a couple of technical things. I can see our guest has joined us live via the giant UHV satellite hovering over Victoria, Texas. He's joining us live from California. Very exciting times. So we'll get started here in just a moment. All right, well, it's 4:02 Central Standard Time, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody to a very exciting Bridge to Brilliance. We are coming to you live from Hollywood, California, and we're very, very excited to have our special guest. We're going to learn more about him in just a second, but I want to thank all of you for taking the time to come. We've got faculty I can see, we've got students, we've got staff members from UHV, and we also have a number of folks joining us from the community at large, whether you be in Victoria or Katy and all kind of parts in between. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Woodrow Wilson Wagner, and it's my privilege to serve as the Director of Institution Programs here at University of Houston, Victoria. And if you've joined us for Bridge to Brilliance before, thanks for coming back. If this is your first Bridge to Brilliance session, hopefully you're going to enjoy it. Tell your friends. It's one of the few opportunities where we gather together faculty, staff, students, and community members, all under one umbrella, all for an hour at a time. And I think if you've joined us before, you'll agree that we've had some really fantastic sessions and people walk away with a lot of valuable lessons learned. And that's certainly my hope today. Our guest, as we promote and advertised, in addition to a cat, is going to be my good friend, Mr. Benjamin Hayes, who was raised here in Victoria. We'll learn more a little bit about his story, but is now working in the industry, and a long dream that he had to do that. And we're going to kind of chart that dream, specifically how he used collaboration and community work to his advantage, and how he was able to become the success that he is today. But like so many of you, he sat in the classrooms here at UHB. Well, the classrooms might have been different. maybe the buildings were different, but he drank the same water here in Victoria, Texas. He, like some of you, went to some of the local schools here. So his story is very indicative of many others in terms of that are gathering us here today. So I just want to spend a moment just briefly introducing him. You've hopefully had a chance to read his fantastic bio. Like I said, I've known Benjamin Hayes for probably, I don't know, it's been 30 or 40 years. It's getting long. I think we met when we were 12 years old, and we've kind of been friends ever since. We attended elementary school together, high school together, and kept in touch all of these years. And one of the things I've been just such amazed by is his incredible and very inspirational journey. You can see he's done some things that a lot of you have probably heard of, whether they be film or television shows. So it's very exciting to see somebody that you know and you grew up with here in Victoria go make it big in Hollywood. So Ben's had a lot of life experiences, and he's going to try to share some of those lessons with us today. But I do want this, as always, to be interactive. The best part of Bridge to Brilliance are your questions. And I want to encourage you to please, please, please write those questions in the chat. At some point, I might kind of pause. And if you'd like to raise hands, I know some of you like to say the questions yourself, and we certainly want to welcome that. So be thinking of some good questions. I have some questions that I want to ask him, and I know many people on our Bridge to Brilliance team might have questions as well. But Ben, I want to start by welcoming you and thanking you so much for doing this. I know you've got a very busy schedule, a lot going on in your life, But thanks for taking the time. You've got students, Ben, you've got faculty here, you've got staff, you've got community members. And I was wondering if you could just start with just a little bit of an introduction, who you are and why you came here today to meet all of these delightful people.
Well, first of all, I just want to make sure that you can hear me because I usually use Zoom, not Teams. Can you hear me?
I can. I'm
Great.
hearing you're great.
Okay, then tech check is done. I'm here because you and I talk a lot, and you mentioned that this would be a good opportunity to for me to share my experiences with people who might find it useful. And that's, part of, no matter what I do, I always find myself in some sort of teaching role, whether it is in my current role in television, or teaching, like talking to alumnus organizations, alumni from Florida State. They graduate every year. There's a new group of film students that come out, so I'm always happy to kind of give back in that way.
Well, that is so fantastic because, as you know, Ben, Hollywood can be, everybody's trying to get their own thing and a dog eat dog world, and everybody's looking out for themselves. One of the things I think I've appreciated you since the age of 12 is that you have a greater concern for the world around you, for human beings around you, whether they are like you or not, whether they are the same color skin or not, whether they are from the same socioeconomics. And I was just wondering if you could just kind of start by talking about that in terms of growing up in a place like Victoria, like so many students on this call are or have, and talk about two things, Ben: the limitations of being in Victoria, which you and I would often lament, and the students on this call could tell you that, but
Yeah.
also the opportunities, because it's kind of a double-edged sword. And talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit.
Yeah. The limitations, and granted, you and I grew up in a time pre-internet, or at
Right,
least at the very beginning
right,
of the internet.
right.
But I would imagine that things, that old adage that the more things change, the more they stay the same, might hold true. And I'm curious, maybe some of your the people on this call can address that. But when I was growing up in Victoria, the limitations were those of expectations, and the world felt very small. I mean, I don't know how it is now, but even going as far to Austin or to Houston felt like a major undertaking,
Right.
And part of that's because, you couldn't drive, and then, most of us were only driving a couple of years, but I know plenty of people commute, hours back and forth. But as far as like the world of possibility, it just felt very like, well, I grew up in a small town. What am I going to do? I have limited choices. The idea of being a writer or being creative or doing something outside of what people expected of you, whatever that is, whether it be becoming an educator or becoming a banker or a lawyer or whatever that might be, that made you feel like you didn't have a lot of choices that you actually do have, but you have to sort of embrace that and not be afraid of that, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And then the opposite side of the coin, that there are limitations, but there are also possibilities, little nuggets that people like you and I found in this community. And then we were able to kind of leverage and then go on to do other things. And that's the kind of nuggets of hope we try to give our students. Is
Yes.
no, Victoria's not Houston. It's not
No.
Austin. It's not Dallas, but it's got some of these things that did sustain us and made us the people that we are. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and this will probably touch on a question that might come up later about University of Houston Victoria specifically. But having a regular community, which we're going to use that word a lot today, I think, having that regular group of people around you, it does not allow you to be anonymous. It does not allow you to necessarily be a wallflower. I mean, certainly there are people who just will not participate in what's going on, but for the most part, because of the small aspect of that, you kind of have to take part. You have to speak up. You have to use your voice sometimes. You can't hide in the corner. You have to kind of claim a little bit, and that's an opportunity that it's probably overlooked because when you're a teenager, you're like, I don't want that. I don't want the spotlight on me. But the fact that you and I and our other friends had such a amount of trust between us to like do these creative things in high school, which I will explain. We were all part of this AV club, basically, is the what you would call it now, and we shot and edited and acted in and produced and then broadcast at our high school small sketches and news segments a la Saturday Night Live. I don't know that
it was quite brilliant and innovative at the time.
I don't know that, but that was a proving ground in a way, and I don't know, you might get that opportunity at a really huge high school, but none of the people I knew when I went to college and went to the world at large and met people from bigger towns and bigger cities had that kind of experience, and it was like it wasn't just in high school. It was like the friends and the family members that we had, everyone got involved. It was kind of great.
And that's the virtue of the smaller knit group, right?
Yes.
Is you do get that. And I think some of our students are sold on that for why they want to come to UHV rather than UT or A&M or Texas State. Now, some of them, they have other considerations, but that sense of community, that sense of family, that sense of closeness, talk about that a little bit more specifically in your journey at UHV. And I think we do have some of your old UHV professors. I think I did see Dr. Fairlamb somewhere in there. So you might have, so be careful what you say. You're gonna have some of your old professors chime in. There he is. There's old Bud Fairlamb. Okay. So yeah, so talk about that a little bit, specifically on that UHV kind of journey.
Well, my favorite classes in when I was at a bigger school, because I did do a year at UT, were like the seminar classes where it was like 10 people in a room. It felt, I mean, you had genuine interest and engagement from not only the other students, but from the professors, because at that point, it's not an auditorium full of 200 people that you're never going to see. The beauty and the intimacy of the classes at University of Houston, Victoria was like that, because I had basically, I think, 4 professors. It was Dr. Fairlamb, Dr. Jekyll, Dr. Schnebley, and Dr. Lockie, who's no longer with us. And I hope I'm pronouncing that. It's been a while. But and I had the same group of students because there's only a few of us who were studying, literature. And what I really loved about that small, not class size is jargony and kind of, it's not what I'm not the spirit of what I'm saying, but it was like we were on this journey of education discovery together. And what I really, really loved, especially at Dr. Fairlamb, Dr. Jekyll, Dr. Schnebley, they were, because they had to teach a wide range of things, they were not allowed to just be specialists. They had to be professionally curious about everything in literature. And that's something that inspired me and kind of keyed me into like, oh, that's one of the things I love about being a writer, is that you have to be professionally curious, or you should be if you're writing at least fiction. You need to be professionally curious, because I'm writing on a show right now. It's about firefighters, so I have to learn about firefighting to an extent. I couldn't go do it. When I was writing Queen of the South, I had to learn about narcotraficante. When I worked on Bluff City Law, I had to learn about the law. When I worked on Breaker and the Beauty, I had to learn about that stuff. And that is something that I saw in a way modeled in that small seminar style, rotating group of people with rotating group of instructors. And like one semester, Dr. Jekyll would teach poetry, and then next time he'd be teaching like just one class on Chaucer. So, it's kind of like we'd go where the professionally curious educators led us. It was an amazing experience. And you got to, again, because of the smallness of it, the intimacy of it, there was trust, and that's one of the things in the writer's room when you're learning. You have to trust that you're not going to embarrass yourself. That's a really hard thing to get over. And that small class size, allows you to sort of trust, all right, I had this thought about this one poem, but what if I'm wrong? But it's okay if you're wrong. In these small class settings with these teachers, there's a lot of trust there, and it's okay for you. They give you the permission to speak up, even though you might not exactly, know what you're saying.
Yeah, another way I say that is they give you the permission or the opportunity to fail in kind of a safe space.
Yes.
That it might not in your career or in your livelihood, but it's kind of a incubator of sense where you can do that. And I think the same as all these years later, you still have professors here at UHV that have that. We've gotten a little larger, Ben, in terms of our buildings, but I think you go to our classes and there still are those small group discussions. We have a large lecture class every now and then, but it's still being able to learn in that environment is terrific. I like what you were saying about trust. And this kind of goes to valuable lessons you've learned in life. And you could do a whole 5 hours on that. But if you narrow it down to specific lessons you learned from people like Dr. Fairlam, some of these other professors, or even your classmates here at UHV, what are some of those things that now, all these years later, you go back in your database and like, where did I get that? Where did that? Oh yeah, that came from Bud Fairland. So,
Well, I can specifically remember. I remember very specifically a class that Dr. Fairlam taught that was about. I can't remember the name of it, but we studied like Eastern thought. Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, and we read selections. And he also showed us movies that kind of demonstrate these principles. And I still think back to that class today, and I just bought a book because I want to reread about Zen Buddhism, and I'm about to start that on my Kindle. But again, it was something that we wouldn't have learned that in high school, and probably wouldn't learn it in public school because it doesn't really have a place in the curriculum. So, you have someone who's bringing truly new ideas and original ideas, or at least new to us, into our minds, and at the right time. It was great. I refer to frequently to a movie that he showed in class, Raise the Red Lantern. It's a fantastic movie. I love it. One of my favorites. I think about the play when we did the Chaucer class that I took that I referenced earlier. I still think about that. And if I'm toying with ideas because I have to. When you are a writer, at some point you have to create an S corp or an LLC for tax stuff. But I was like, maybe I'll go with Chanticleer Productions, who is the rooster from Canterbury Tales. So I very, very vividly remember those classes and the stuff that I learned, and it gave me a deep love of language. To this day, I sometimes have to yell at my fellow writers on the show that I'm on, because I'm like, I love language, and you need to get it right. And I think that was part of because all of those professors had a deep, abiding love of literature and language that to this day I carry on.
But when you were sitting in Dr. Fairlam and other classes,
Mhm.
you weren't necessarily I'm going to be writing for a network television show one day. You weren't necessarily thinking that, or were you?
No. I was interested in film only as a spectator. Let's go to the movies. I wanted to be a poet.
I've read some of your poetry. It's very engaging.
Oh, thank you.
It really woos the ladies. The ladies love it.
No, I've only written one poem recently. It's on Instagram. I like it. But that's what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until a little bit with the encouragement of Dr. Fairland, but it wasn't until I graduated school and went further afield in Austin and Spain, actually, that I kind of got into the idea of filmmaking or screenwriting. And then it wasn't really until after grad school, when I moved to LA, did I get into the idea of working in television. And the reason is, which is, again, we're going to come back to this time and time again with the theme, was I've been working for a producer, and I've worked on a couple of indie films, and it was very much like, it was always very temporary. It was like, let's do this thing. It was always, mission oriented, and everything is, because it's business. But on a television show, especially on a long running television show like True Blood, which I was on for the first few seasons, it was the first time I was like, oh, this is the community. Like, this is almost like a family. And I know we're in a time right now where, and I agree with this, that you should not say, work is like family, because it's not the same thing. But there is that sense of like, everyone's here trying to achieve the same goal using their own specific expertises, and everyone has value, and no one, everyone's contributing in some way. And it's kind of cool because you get people who, like property masters, the guys and the women and the men who make the props that we use, like you see someone handling something. They are so good at what they do that they have so many details that sometimes if you're not in that particular, if you're not looking at that part of the elephant, it can be overwhelming how much they know about what they do. And it's impressive and intimidating in a way, but it's great too, because everyone wants to do the best they can. And that's when everyone wants to do the best they can and you trust those people to do the best they can, then the working towards the common goal creates this kind of, like I said, a familial sort of bond. And I was on that show for years. I still talk to those people, even though the show hasn't been on the air for a long time.
And those relationships, because you have that collaboration, because you have that community, probably then led to other things. Because as we tell our students all the time, it's not always what you know, it's who you know, and being able to network, go
Yes,
outside of your own comfort zone. You'd probably find that to be the case as well.
absolutely. I mean, I have certainly gotten jobs based on previous relationships. And I don't want to get too into this details, but I work a lot often as what's called a script coordinator, which is like an apprentice writer job. And I've gotten good enough at it that sometimes people call me. I did not turn in this resume to this person. I've got a showrunner or an executive producer call me from a show that said, "Hey, we got your resume on our desk. Are you available?" And I mean, sadly, I'm usually not. But anyway, yeah, like it's those relationships, especially if you get to a point where you're pretty good at what you do. But more importantly, if you get to a point where people like working with you, because that's the thing I've heard from very, very experienced writers in this business when they're hiring other writers. Yes, it's important that you're good on the page. Yes, it's important that you can tell a story, but they frequently will emphasize it's just as important to them that they can sit in a room with you for 8 to 10 hours a day and talk about story and talk about your families and talk about your life experiences, so that you can turn something into something that people want to watch and that people respond to. And they want to be in that room with someone who's fun or who's pleasant, who doesn't create stress. I mean, it's different from being controversial, because sometimes you have to talk about things that are difficult. But you don't want the person doing the talking to be difficult, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. You're a great teacher. So, teacher Ben Hayes, I want you to define the words community and collaboration in this context you've been talking about. So,
I'm
for
prepared for this.
takeaway, good, you're prepared.
Yeah.
Let's start with community. What does that mean in this context?
Well, there's the obvious one, which is like, I live on this street. This street is my community. It's the people in my immediate surroundings. But, it stratifies in weird ways largely because of social media and the internet, and also the way technology has impacted how we communicate with our peers. For example, on Twitter, there's this thing called screenwriter Twitter. And I unless you're looking for it, or unless you yourself are a screenwriter, you might not know about it. But it is this weird, legitimately amazing community of people who you're either trading job recommendations or posting that you're looking for someone. Sometimes it's just stupid arguments about whether we should be using 2 dashes or 1 for interrupted speech in a dialogue.
That's very important.
Sometimes we're talking about projects, or sometimes we're talking about The Last of Us. Did you guys watch that? Could you breathe? No, I couldn't. But it's a community, and it's viable, and it's real, and that's one of the things that as Twitter has undergone some changes, that community has felt the impact of it, and it's been affected. It's a little, we're all hoping that it pulls through, but that's like when I say community, it can be something like that. It can also be a community. I mean, this LA is the second biggest city in the world. Or sorry, in this country, but the community of Hollywood, especially writers, is very small. Like any show that I'm on at this point in my career, I'm going to know someone who's like, if you say, "Oh, I know so and so," there's very few degrees of separation. So that's also another type of community. That's kind of how I feel about it. I think that answers the question dealing with this.
Okay, you define community. Excellent. I'm going to give you an A- on that. That was lovely, because the cat ran across, so I have to give you A-. Collaboration now. What is collaboration?
Collaboration is this. So this is my homespun definition that I did in advance of this. It's being open and humble and allowing others' ideas and others' voices to be part of whatever is going on. I'll just use an example. In the world of, because film and TV traditionally are kind of considered separate entities, although they've merged in the past 15 years. But there is this idea, like, I mean, we could ask any of the students here. You can name directors. You can name, Steven Spielberg, Michael Mann, Wes Anderson. You can go on and on and on. It's one person, and so a lot of credit goes to the individual. But none of those movies could be made without that person behind the scenes being collaborative. In other words, someone like Martin Scorsese. Everyone loves his movies, right? But he brings a lot to the table, but his editor, a woman named Thelma Shoemaker, is probably close to as largely responsible for his look and his feel of his movies as he is, because she brought something to the table. He had to collaborate with her. He couldn't go in charging and say, no, only I have the best idea, or only my idea works. You've got to be open and humble to say, I may not be the smartest person in the room. Someone else might have a better idea. In television, that gets expanded a gazillion times, because very few people can name directors in television. You can name showrunners, but most people don't, because it's just a little bit kind of inside baseball. But I will tell you that every single person on the set, as I mentioned earlier, has an opinion about the story, and that may not just be the words on the page. This might be like this wall behind me. If we were shooting a television show, someone would say, that blue wall tells a story. Someone cared enough to go look for a specific blue paint, because they want a certain look. And that tells you a little bit who that person is. So everyone weighs in on the story, the big capital S story, because of the choices that go into what we see on the screen. And if you go in there not being collaborative, you're going to go in there thinking, I have everything figured out. I don't need to listen to anyone else. Collaboration is starting the process by going in and saying, I know what I know, but let's see what everyone else knows, and then we can have a conversation about it.
That was excellent. I'm going to give you an A on that one. That was great.
Yeah.
Okay. So Dr. Fairlem will be grading you too. He'll be sending his critique sheet to you later as well. What are some barriers to community and collaboration? What gets in the way? And I want you to tell us how you specifically transcend them, and how maybe you've done that recently to transcend, because you just did something really, really fantastic. You got a script and a major television show, which is a huge, huge deal. And I have a feeling that the recipe for that had something to do with community and collaboration. But talk about some of those barriers, things that get in the way.
That get in the way of what exactly?
Of community and collaboration, because the way you've spelled it out sounds great. And people are like, well, yeah, that's obvious. Do that, right? Go do community and collaboration. But this is the real world. Things get in the way of being able to do those things. In your mind, what's that?
Well, there are very real barriers to entry sometimes. Sometimes they're financial. Like there's a very real movement going on right now to try to make sure that people who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunities can start the process to becoming a writer in television by getting into the writers' rooms as a support staff, as a PA. But that's a real thing. It's a real conversation that's happening right now. I try to do my part by helping identify. We have like these scholarship candidates that we give out every year to try to get people these classes for free. But that can be a real barrier for entry to joining the community that you want to be part of. And that's as a joiner. Sometimes it's, I hate to say it, but sometimes it's ego. I mean, I grew up in Victoria, and there's very much an ethos of doing it yourself, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, not wanting to accept help, not wanting to seek out help, because only you can do it. And I don't know, I've just come to not see that as the way the world works. I don't know many people who are truly like self-made. But if you go too far into this whole like individualistic mentality, then that ego can calcify and become a problem for you wanting to both reach out for help and also help. Because if you believe that you can do it yourself, why should anyone else get any help? So I've just kind of come to reject that a little bit and think like, pay it forward, if that makes sense. Those are
Yeah.
two. I think there's probably also, at least, I mean, it's weirdly similar in Texas and in Los Angeles. Geography can be a problem, you know. I'm not part of anything that goes on near the beach. It's just too far. If there's like a screenwriter group that's meeting up in Santa Monica, I'm not going to go. I can imagine in Texas, like, if you're in Goliad and you want to be part of some kind of professional or social organization that meets up in San Antonio, or maybe not San Antonio, but Houston, it's just going to be difficult. So there are some barriers for joining. There's also a question in the chat. I don't know if you saw that from Hunter.
I did. We're going to ask it. And it comes from Hunter Follett, Ben, who's one of our local CEOs of Tejas Productions.
Mm-hmm.
And Hunter says, oftentimes folks feel like joining a community will cost them something, either in terms of time or energy. As a result, if they don't see how joining a community will immediately benefit them, as a result, don't do so. Could you either confirm or refute this? Perhaps provide an example where you joined a community without a clear line of sight to how it would benefit you, but it ended up being very worthwhile.
Okay. I think the first example that comes to mind is a union, because whether it's the Writers Guild or the IATSE, which is the biggest union for, I guess, for lack of a better term, like blue collar workers, like the people who actually like make the things happen. But it's when you first join, it's a pain in the butt because it costs a lot of money. Sometimes if you're just starting out, you don't have that money. So you have to go on a payment plan. And if you're young, you don't necessarily care about the healthcare as much as you do when you're older. So a lot of the reasons to join the union are not readily apparent, or at least immediately apparent. And I still have people who do directly benefit from that healthcare who complain about, like, oh, they raised the rates this year. But the thing that you have to remember is, or for the union part of it, is, you're not just, it's not just for you, it's for those who come after you, or for those who are, your peers currently. Because, a lot of times, like I've been very lucky and I've worked solidly for the past 8 years, but there are plenty of times that people don't have that continuity of employment in in the film business. That's just the nature of it. And having, like, putting into, for the common good for everyone, make sure that everyone's taken care of, because there's going to be a time when you're not taken care of. So sometimes I'm looking at Hunter's question here, the costs in terms of time or energy, it's just something that comes to me. It's like kind of that paying it forward thing. Like, yeah, you're not going to want to pay those dues or go to the quarterly meetings. They're awful. They're long. It's like 6 hours on a Sunday, when I could be doing other things, and that's 4 times a year. And then sometimes there's specialty meetings. And then when we have to do votes, like, you have to basically like get on the phone and like call people. I mean, it's really an effort. But I just, I tell myself that it's for a good that is larger than just myself. So I don't know if that answers Hunter's question. I think if it's not close, at least it's a kind of a glancing blow, and I'm happy to nail down any more specifics if that didn't suffice.
Yeah, so Ben and Woodrow, maybe I can just extend the question just a bit. And again, apologies for the poor syntax in the question. I think where I was going with that, Ben, was really more. I think sometimes people think that, joining whether it's a union or just a broader, any sort of group or community organization, it's like, this is going to either cost me time, money, talent, brain power. You're right. Sort of Sunday afternoons, what have you. And it's sometimes you don't necessarily see exactly how it'll benefit you straight off.
Yeah.
Whether you don't see whether. But down the line, it turns out that putting that investment in, right, making those relationships with other people, for me, it's turned out that I've ended up doing business with people who I'm involved with through Rotary, or I've found employees or customers through professional organizations. And even though that wasn't necessarily the intention, I think to your point, maybe the intention for me of joining organizations might be to give back, or whatever the mission of the organization is. That there are sort of ancillary benefits to me personally as well. And selfishly.
Mm-hmm. No, I think the idea that the word you use, investment, is good, because investment generally is not always going to be a sure thing or immediately apparent sure thing, and that's also, I mean, that's a very specific thing to my life. Are these people frequently belong to writers groups, and it can be a real drain on your time because you have to read other people's scripts, and that's like 120 pages. And you have to give them notes, and you have to find a way to give them notes so it doesn't destroy their dream or destroy their, their spirit. But eventually you're going to get that feedback. So it's again an investment. It's like you kind of have to just accept that there's going to be some. You're going to take the good and take the bad. Facts of life.
Would you like to sing the theme song to Facts of Life now?
I don't remember it.
It's great. There's so many people, Ben, who are on this that don't even remember Facts of Life or were born. So we're old. All right. So this is the time I really do want audience members. And I know some of you like to ask your own questions. You like to turn on your mic. You like to turn on your camera. Please, if anyone has a question, if you can raise your hand, and we would just love to hear from your question. Anybody have a specific question they want to ask Ben Hayes at this time? Because I've got a few more things, but I just want to check in with you guys to see if y'all might have something. Anybody have anything right now they want to get off their chest? All right, well, we'll come back. If people want to ask some more, we'll have an opportunity. There's Dr. Chance Glenn, our provost. Dr. Chance Glenn.
How you doing, sir? Thank you I just want to say thank you for gracing us and being a part of this. Woodrow, thank you for teeing it up. This has been pretty interesting, what I've been able to catch. I just got back from another meeting. Very interested in a lot of these things that you're discussing. So I just wanted to say thank you and carry on.
Thank you, Dr. Glenn.
All right.
Thank you so much. And Ben, Dr. Glenn is a performer his own self. He's been nominated for Grammy Awards. He does podcasts. He's going to be speaking at various conventions and all kinds of conferences that have to do with space and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So he is just a fantastic provost and performer himself. You guys might want to collaborate at some point and do something. Who knows? Okay, we've got some more questions coming in. Christy Henry, my old former student, she's got a question. Christy, go ahead.
When you mentioned the union and how you put in the time, for the greater good, I'm a political science major. And so I see the similarities between voting, like the cost benefits do not seem worth it, just as unions do for you. So I was curious, what suggestions would you have for to overcome that apathy? Because I do think kindness is needed. So, but it's not, the message is not getting received.
That's difficult because I do a lot of kind of canvassing for candidates and stuff, and with unions it's easy because it's required here in in California. You have to join the union, so that part's taken care of as far as the union goes. But as far as convincing people why it's good, especially people, because there are people who have to join who aren't happy that they're there, they'd rather be on their own. And I think it's kind of like talking to a cranky relative. You have to make as many inroads as you can, talk to them where they're at, not be super combative, and also know kind of you've given the information, you've given them with kindness and whatnot. You also have to know when you've done enough and let them kind of reach their own conclusions. I know that's not, I wish there were a magic formula answer, but there are times that I'm making these calls on behalf of the union or for a cause. We did a thing here in Los Angeles for some needed reform for our jail system, and it's tough because you got a lot of people who are busy, who it's just not front of mind. one of the things that we have done with both things is trying to find what's urgent about what your message is, and sometimes that helps. Like if you're like, well, what you don't think about is this, that that overcrowding in jails doesn't affect you because you're not going to go to jail. But the fact is, overcrowding in jails displaces people and puts, because a lot of people in the jails here in Los Angeles are people with who need help, like for mental issues, and with overcrowding jails, that displaces them, puts them out on the street. So it does affect you. You just have to find a way to make the urgency apparent, because a lot of times it's there, but it's just not. You just don't see it.
Excellent question, Christy. That's fantastic. We've got another one coming in, Ben, from Jorge. He says, "What's the process you take whenever you're creating a new project?"
Well, I generally as a television writer, generally you're not the creator of the show. You're going to be given a script, so you're not necessarily creating new stuff. You're carrying the torch. You're carrying the batons passed to you. These stories need to continue, and then sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to bring in a new character or create a new storyline. And so a lot of the stuff is sort of already kind of in the mix. That's just for TV. If I'm working on my own thing that I'm going to write, I do a lot of brainstorming. I do a lot of walking. I have a lovely street that none of y'all can see. I had to close the door because the UPS guy's here. He's very noisy.
You should bring him in and ask him some questions.
Hey, you want to talk to some people? I do a lot of. I think best when I'm walking. And as Woodrow can attest, a lot of times when we talk on the phone, he hears all the various birds that live in my street because I just walk up and down the street in a loop. But when I'm trying to come up with something that I think will be interesting, I go for walks, and then I come back and I get my yellow notepad and just write stuff down. And eventually I get to the point where my hand cramps up and then I have to switch to the computer. So it's a lot of think. And I joke when I first started dating my girlfriend, I'd say I have to go write, and so I'd sit at the kitchen table. I would just be like this, and she'd come in and she'd ask, "When's the writing going to start?" I'm like, "It's happening." I mean, the actual typing part of it's the least part of it. It's a lot of times thinking and talking things through, calling people, saying, "Hey, what do you think of this story? Like, what if the character did?" I mean, so there's for me, a lot of walking and talking, and then eventually I'm like, "All right, enough of that. You got to sit down and type." So.
All right, another one is coming in from Dr. Bud Horace Fairlam. Okay, remember this answer will be graded, Ben. Great. Talk about some of the steps between Victoria and Hollywood. Now, we didn't mention some of the steps in your bio, but you've literally been all over the world before you kind of got to Hollywood from Victoria. So talk about that a little bit.
Okay, I'll keep it short, but basically, after I graduated from UHV, I was like, I'm not going to stay in Victoria. I want to go to a big city. So I tried to find a job in Austin. I could not. I went to Houston, and it was really in Houston that, because I was living by myself and I lived close to a movie theater, and I lived close to a movie theater that showed like small movies, that I kind of was like, oh, there's someone out there who doesn't have a lot of money, who's making movies that people like. And that kind of put the thought in my head. And then after a year of living in Houston, I moved to Spain, and I happened to live with a bunch of film students, and they were making short films, and that kind of further cemented my thought about this. I still didn't really have the confidence or the courage to do it myself. It wasn't until I moved back to Austin from Spain that I eventually started making short films. I was working at Dell Computers at the time. It was real fun because I was the weirdo in the department of logistics with all these ex-military guys. And then here I am, as soon as I could, as soon as 5 o'clock hit, I was like, I gotta go because I gotta go film something. So I started making short films, and I got to the point where like, this is what I want to do. So after a couple of years of psyching myself up for it, I eventually applied to film schools. I applied to UT because I wanted to stay in Austin because I love Austin. UT did not want me twice, but Florida State did. So I eventually got accepted by Florida State graduate program for film. I moved to Tallahassee, spent 2.5 years in Tallahassee. And then about halfway through that tenure, I decided I was not going to move back to Austin because I was going to move to Los Angeles because the film incentive in Texas was no longer being funded. Like the Texas legislature was like, no more of that. So they took away all the tax credits. So the amount of production dropped quite a bit. I think that's probably different now because of Taylor Sheridan is basically making everything on Paramount.
Right.
It's all being shot in Texas. So, but that's a new thing. Anyway, those were the concrete, very kind of dry biographical steps.
So let me just ask you about one of those points in the road. Didn't get into UT Austin, which is kind of your vibe, but then you have to go all the way to Florida for film school. Was there any part of you were like, screw this, I'm not going to Florida? Because I don't remember, like, as children, I don't remember you spending a lot of time in Florida. That was like, I don't know, maybe.
Florida State is because it's a great film school. I mean,
Sure.
they did something very unique amongst the film schools. Like, look, I mean, it's stupid to even compete. I don't know why these things exist. Like, oh, the #1 film school is blah blah. Like, #1 film school for what? Like, if you go to New York Film School, New York University Films, the Tisch School for the Performing Arts, and get your graduate degree there are people who go into debt and they're like working on their thesis films for years. Like Florida State was like, we're not going to allow that happen. We're going to take some money from the government to encourage production here in Florida by creating a class of filmmakers from Florida. And it was at Florida State University where they decided to do it. And so they basically paid for all your film equipment and for your actual film, which we did use back in the day. They don't do that anymore. But, you know, they had, it was very small. My class was 24 people. It was similar to UHV in that there was a handful of instructors, and they had to kind of wear different hats. Like our directing teacher also did teach a writing class, even though his primary thing was not writing. But you know, you had different faculty wearing different hats, being professionally curious about other crafts, so they could get, you know, so they could give you kind of a complete education. Florida State was a great experience. I did not love Tallahassee, but I loved my classmates. And speaking of community, I still talk to a lot of my classmates. When I moved to Los Angeles, I lived with 2 of them. And, you know, we still talk to a lot of them. And we, Florida State got a big boost a few years ago when one of our alums, Barry Jenkins, he won the Oscar for the movie Moonlight, which was a really great movie.
So as a Florida State alum, do you get to like hold the Oscar or like have a chance to rent it? Or
I haven't. So I know Barry, but I have not talked to Barry in a long time.
You should get a photo with Barry and the Oscar. All right. So who else has a question? If you got it, please raise your hand, or if you'd like to write it in the chat, you can. While we're waiting for a few more questions, we're getting kind of almost to the end of our time. We're going to do a little, This Is Your Life, Ben Hayes. And I'm going to show some things, and I want you to just kind of explain to me a little bit something about these things and some of the images you saw a little earlier. Let me do my share the screen, get my thing going here. Okay, slideshow here. Okay, number 1, explain the California flag. Why does it look like a former Soviet republic with like a star and a bunch of red? Please explain.
I know why the bear's there. I don't know why the flag's
Well, the bear, there's like bears in like Lake Tahoe and the Sierra Nevadas. I get the bear. I'm stuck on the star and the red stripe.
You didn't tell me to prepare for a civics lesson.
I know, I didn't. I didn't all a surprise.
I don't know. I'll have to look it up. That's what we say when you're in a meeting and you don't have the answer for your script. You're like, you know what? Let me get back to you on that.
Excellent. See, when we were growing up, there was no Google. How did we look up things, Ben, when there was no Google? What did we do? It's craziness. Okay. Who's that guy? That's you. Okay. The Hollywood sign. Have you ever touched it?
You can't go up there, or if you
do.
Oh,
but they did, like on TV shows like 90210. They touched it. They arranged the letters. Is that not allowed?
If you go up there, they're gonna arrest you. Like they'll
really.
Yeah.
Who's they?
The LAPD.
So is there like a road over here, or how close can you get?
On the backside of that hill, is actually where Warner Brothers is. You can hike up to the tree to the right there. I think that might be far, but there's a tree not too far from the Hollywood sign to the right, as we're looking at it, called the Wisdom Tree. And you can hike up to the Wisdom Tree, and that's as close as you can really get.
So the answer is no, you've never touched the letters.
No, you're going to get arrested.
Okay, tell me about these lovely institutions. Let's start with this one. For people who don't know it, Nazareth Academy here in Victoria, Texas. What in the world did you ever learn at Nazareth Academy that you're using right now today?
Well, Nazareth Academy is where I learned that I wanted to be a writer. In fact, part of my sort of longer form bio that I did not send you discusses how, as a tiny asthmatic kid who was prone to getting a little bit bullied, the way that I would like bond with my classmates and the way I made friends was by writing stories. And I'd like write these like 3 to 5 page short stories that featured different classmates as the heroes in these like action adventures.
Was I ever in your stories? I don't remember being in your stories.
Not in Nazareth. You were not in
Nazareth. Oh, that's right. I was at OLV. Sorry.
Yeah. But anyway, yes, I think fondly of Nazareth because that's where I got the idea, and that's where I won some creative writing contests. Had great teachers. I'm still friends with several people who I went to school with there.
I'm pretty sure there's some plaques or some statues of you there, so you can go there and visit.
I doubt that.
What about this school, Our Lady of Victory? I think that's where we met.
Yeah, I only did a year there. It was 8th grade.
Important lessons you learned there? Math counts. Don't forget about math counts. Were you in math counts?
No, I was not.
You weren't in math counts?
No, I was not. I was not a big math fan. I would say that this is where, coming back to the whole community idea, like the friends that I made there were kind of the same friends that I had through high school and kind of to this day.
It was a small group of humans.
Yep.
And some people have good experiences at Catholic schools. Some of you have bad. I think we turned out okay, right? Speaking of Catholic schools, then we went to a place called St. Joseph High School. Yes. And you alluded to a little bit of that when we created the TV show, right? Yes. That was so cool. Talk about that.
We have another question from Dr. Fairlamb.
Oh, which stereotypes about Hollywood are the most misleading, says Dr. Fairlamb?
I would say one that's most misleading is that everyone who works in Hollywood is like extremely wealthy. I don't know how much people pay attention to this news stuff, but last year there was almost a big strike in part of my craft, the script coordinating group. We are part of IATSE, which again is like they call it below the line. So it's like not the actors, not the directors, not the writers, but the people who actually like set up the lights and move the trucks and do the makeup and the hair and do the costumes and do the editing and do the camera. Like these people, it can range from doing pretty well to like barely getting by. And just because you work in the film and television business doesn't necessarily mean like you're driving, the nicest car, living in the nicest house. It's a lot of people who work here, and there's only a very few who are like who live that so-called Hollywood lifestyle. I would also say that the stereotype about people being like, especially those actors and writers and the people at the top being jerks, is not accurate. I mean, there are definitely some jerks, but for the most part, most of them came up through the ranks and have the humility and the temerity to remember how it was, coming through those ranks. So you've got a lot of great people at the top, and then you've got a few jerks who kind of just ruin it for everyone. And unfortunately, that's a stereotype that gets set, is because it's a loud stereotype. The guy who's like, bullying people around and yelling and screaming, that's entertaining. That's fun to watch. And that's what makes that stereotype possible. And is that another one?
Is it possible to get through the door without a connection?
I think it depends on your personality. It's possible, but eventually you're going to make a connection. So I don't know. It's kind of a weird, like a little bit of a yes and no answer, because if you were to like just move here and eventually work as a barista or a bartender, eventually you're going to meet someone who knows someone. And I have had several coffees or happy hours with people who have been referred to me like, hey, this is my friend's nephew. He just moved to town. He doesn't know anyone, but he kind of does because he has a connection. Just like if someone here was like, "Hey, I'm going to move to LA because I want to be a screenwriter," I would not be surprised at all if you, Woody, said, "Hey, let me give you Ben's number so you can have a coffee." It's I would say even in our small town, Victoria, Texas, we had a teacher who worked in Hollywood. And if nothing else, you could like reach out to that person. So
he won an Emmy. We had an Emmy award-winning teacher.
yeah. So I'm going to say that you can, but you're probably going to end up either making that connection yourself or already have it if you don't, but you just haven't looked at it. So you're going to, you'll either make that connection yourself, but more likely than not, you'll find a way to use a connection or to
Okay, time is ticking down, but we have Christy Henry with one more question.
I do actually. Do you find it easier to write about things that you know about rather than like something you don't know? Like I'm a huge fan of True Blood. So, like how does the research for something like that compare to your other shows that you've written?
Well, it's funny that adage about write what you know is true in that you should write what you know as far as like emotional truth, right? I mean, everyone knows what it's like to love someone and not be loved back. And that's sort of the whole like, Sookie thing, or to have like, something, familial disappointment, like all these things are the things that as far as research goes, that's when the research comes in. Like if I'm writing a story about, like I'm currently working on an idea about a mayor of a small town who has to fight vampires. Okay. So I had to actually call a couple of small towns and talk to the people who like worked in the mayor's office and see how things work. But so I didn't know that part, and I can get that part by researching. On True Blood, I remember one of the memorable things I had to do was research the season 4, I think was the witches. We had to actually call and get a Wiccan, to talk to the writers about the routine, the rituals, and like putting salt around the room. And it's like, just so we'd have some of the details right. So it's twofold. Write what you know, because you're going to know some human truths and some real things. But then when you get to the point where you need to fill in the details that you don't know, that's when you call in the experts or do your research. That's what we do on the show I'm on right now, Station 19. We'll write the story as far as the emotional through lines and the connections and the characters and the relationships. And then when it's time, we use our consultants, our fire consultants, to tell us, well, this is how a firefighter would actually do this. Sometimes it changes the story. Other times it's just kind of putting it in where it needs to go as far as the details and the specifics.
So back to that Wiccan thing, did you learn some spells that you can share in the chat that all of us can use in our everyday lives?
All I remember is that you can put the circle of salt down and it'll be protected. That's what I remember.
Okay, that is important.
Yeah.
Well, our time is running out, but I just want to show you this photo. From this photo, one is led to believe you can just touch the sign. How did this person get that close? I still don't believe you on that. I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree on that one. Here are some of your shows. This was your film that was shown at Southwest. Did you get any input in designing this movie poster?
No, I was just the writer, as they say. I'm just the writer.
And when you saw the movie poster, what'd you think?
I like the other one better. There's a different one where Ken, the guy in the middle, is kind of cuddling Milo, who's the preacher in bed. Okay. I like that poster better. Okay. This movie's available on Hulu, by the way.
Excellent.
For free.
Queen of the South.
Yeah.
That was a good experience?
Yeah. I still talk to 3 or 4 of the writers from that show.
And did those collaborations then lead to other things like Station 19?
Yeah, not directly. But on another show I worked on, someone gave my resume to the showrunner in Station 19, and that's how I got the job. But yeah.
What is this lovely place?
That's the Griffith Observatory. Yes.
And does it really have this view where you can see the? I remember when you took me there was a lot of smog. There's
not smog right now because we had so much rain, so all the smog. So they
so the drought's over.
No.
Okay. Ben Hayes, we could just go on and on and on with more pictures, but we're gonna stop here at some point. I want to stop sharing my screen and just really want to thank you for spending this time. Again, Ben, you've got students on this call, you've got faculty on this call, you've got staff. I hope you'd be okay with any of those people following up with you especially faculty who might want you to come to their class and be a guest speaker, especially staff who might have a staff activity that they might want you to come be the guest speaker, but really especially the students who might just want to kind of pick your brain on some stuff. Like, Ben, you used to breathe the same air I'm breathing right now. I have a lot of dreams for my life. How do I get to all these kind of places? So I hope you'd be willing to do that. And I think a lot of people on this call got a lot from this. Any last few words you just kind of like to leave us with before you go on to your jet-setting Hollywood elitist life?
I just said that wasn't the stereotype.
Oh, no, wait.
God, there's this video that I saw the other day. It's of this kid. I don't know how to share it, but can I just type it into the chat?
Sure, please.
Okay, just bear with me while I grab it real fast. Let's see. Just give me a minute. Here it is. This kid filled up my tank, as I like to say, just about not giving up. Like this video, I was watching it in Target, someone sent it to me, and I just started to just feel so emotional and proud and inspired by this kid's joy. And it's about not ever giving up. I mean, don't be a jerk about it, but believe in yourself. And it's all about this kid who just learned how to ride his bike for the first time, and he gets off his bike and his dad's asking him questions. And I don't know, I just share this video with everyone these days, kind of proselytizing. This is what keeps me going. Because even when you've achieved a certain level of success, there's always, you always need to find a reason to keep at it sometimes. And I would say, watch this video and don't give up.
Well, speaking of watching videos, this has been recorded, and we have a number of instructors, Ben, who have already been asking me, I'm not going to be able to come, but can I get the recording to show my students, to do assignments with my students? So your words will live on forever, Ben, by the glory of Microsoft Teams.
Great.
So thank you for spending this time. I hope the next time you are in Texas, we can have you here. I'm sure Dr. Chance Glenn, our provost, and Dr. Bob Glenn would love to have you here and have a lovely reception, and maybe you could meet more of our students and our faculty and our staff. But thanks for taking this time. Maybe we'll do it again sometime, but thank you so much, Ben. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you all. And yeah, Woody, if anyone wants anything, you have my contact info.
All right. Well, God bless you, sir. You have a good evening. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next month for more Bridge to Brilliance. Everybody take care.